Alright, welcome to another video. I know कि SQL की प्लेलिस्ट में मैंने ये वीडियो बहुत दिनों के बाद बनाया, so apologies guys. Alright, तो इस वीडियो में हम बात करने वाले हैं फाइनली MySQL के डेटा टाइप्स के बारे में. इनफैक्ट MySQL में डेटाबेस काफी सारे हैं, so we will focus only on those that we are using in our project. तो हमारे क्लियर वाटर्स कम्युनिकेशन के डेटा में जो भी डेटा टाइप्स यूज होगा, that is what I'm limiting this video to. So let's take a look at it. First is an integer, very commonly used. The description is integer numbers without decimal points. So where do we use integers? We use integers in, say, application ID or say gender ID, and we will take a look at this in this example real quickly. So let's go to our database design and let's take a look at where we used integer. I think where we used is, let's say, Beam store. Okay. So every store need to have an integer. So see, we have used something called as a tiny integer, but again, it's the same thing. The only difference would be that अगर हम integer use करेंगे, तो we will be able to give values from say -2, I think it's 2 million, is it? Okay, I don't know what that is, but it's a very long number. So you can give a very long integer if we use this int. If we use tiny integer, maybe we'll not be able to use these many numbers. So I think it makes sense that we have used tiny integer here rather than the integer because हमेशा जब तुम रियल लाइफ में डेटाबेस पे काम करोगे तो हमेशा स्पेस का मारामारी होगा that you should not be using any data types which will use a lot of bytes in the memory. So if you use integer, this is using 4 bytes, but if you use maybe tiny integer, it will use a lot less bytes. So let's take a look. एक काम करते हैं, टाइनी इंटीजर देखते हैं कि कितना रेंज ऑफ वैल्यूज अलाउ करता है और साइज कितना यूज करता है. सो द वे आई वुड डू दिस इज आई वुड गो टू से चैट जीपीटी and I will say what is the range value, only if I can spell it, what is the range value and size in bytes for data type tiny in MySQL. Let's see what information is out there. चलेगा. So let's see. It's thinking. I think my internet is slow today. We'll wait for this to show up. Okay, so you can see it says for range of values allowed is -128 to -127. So now this is a problem. So we should not be using tiny integers. So I take my words back because अगर मैं एप्लीकेशन आईडी में टाइनी इंटीजर यूज करूंगा, so after the 127th application in that table, it will give me an error. So I need a longer integer. So in int makes sense. But anyway, let's say if we had used tiny integer, कितना byte use करेगा? So I think it will use 1 byte, which is pretty small. But let's move on. So integer is done. Let's look at string data types or text data type. And there are a couple of, I think there are a couple examples that we have used in our project. Let's look at the varchar, 40, and tiny text. I don't know इसको varchar बोलते हैं क्या varchar बोलते हैं, let's call it as a varchar because I think मैंने varchar सुना है. So varchar is variable characters. With what that means is you can have different numbers of characters. So in this case, I'm saying 40. मतलब 40 characters use कर सकता हूँ मैं. Now it allows us to use 65,535 characters, so pretty flexible. And then it will store roughly 1 to 2 bytes, I think, depending on the number of characters we have in the varchar. All right, length of the stored string plus 1 or 2 bytes. So 40 means 40 bytes plus 1 2, that is 42 bytes. I don't know if the value in the column is 40 byte or 40 characters, it will end up using 40 bytes plus 1 or 2 bytes. So I think that's what it means. Okay. Examples. We have used first name, last name. So Raj, RT, Kadir, Melvin, all of these analyst names, we have defined it as varchar 40. Now, tiny text is interesting. Where have we used tiny text? And this is what I have changed compared to what we discussed in the database design videos. So let me go back to our database design, and we'll see here, or this is also called as the EER diagram, entity relationship diagram. So initially, I think previous videos में हमने क्या किया था? If we look at say outcome, हमने outcome ID को outcome ID को रखा था, I think it was integer or tiny integer 1 2 3 something, because we only have three outcomes. So approve, decline and withdraw, और उसको हमने 1 2 3 ID दिया था. So I think what I did was I changed it to the outcome ID. I changed it to tiny or variable character here, which is like 10. So I changed it to A for approve, D for decline, and W for withdraw. So it's not 1 2 3 anymore as we discussed in the previous videos. I've changed it to A, D, and W. And जब हम डेटा ऐड करेंगे ना हमारे डेटाबेस में, you will see what I'm talking about. Similarly, din Q के लिए भी ना मैंने I think it was tiny integer previously. I changed it to values. Sorry, I changed it to tiny text. And let me see. I'll show you what I changed it to. So for Q, I changed it to C for consumer existing, CBP for consumer post bureau, CPRB for consumer pre-bureau, and Visa check VC. Why did I do that? Because it's easier to recognize it other than using 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so let's move on to date and time. I think these are the only string values we are using. Let's move on to date and time. So obviously we have date actioned and date tagged, and all of these are stored in a date time format. And remember, date time जब हम use करते हैं, तो our dates are stored in a format. I think it defaults to this format, or do we have to specify the format? Let's go back to our ERD diagram and see what that is. So we go to fact applications. And let's double click on fact application table. And let's see date time. Okay. So it doesn't tell you कि मुझे एक specific format चाहिए. It by default stores date in this format. Year, month, and date with hour, minutes, and seconds, time format. All right. And it stores, every date will store 8 bytes of space in the memory. Fair enough. Now enumerated. Now enumerated is a list of 65,535 distinct values. So when do we end up using enumerated? हमको पता है कि हमारे जो values है ना वो एक particular list होगा, particular options होगा हमेशा, like approve, decline and withdraw, right? Most of the time it's approve, decline and withdraw. So instead of typing approve, it's better to use any one of these options, and it will probably end up using 1 or 2 bytes. I think that if I'm not wrong, this also depends on the number of characters we are using in the value plus 1 or 2 bytes. All right. An example is approve, decline, withdraw, and this is ID, but we also have to save the full name of Q name, so consumer existing and all of that. And where did we end up using this? Let's go back and we'll go to dim Q. And you see in our table, I kind of gave them a predetermined list: consumer existing, post bureau, pre bureau, and visa check. All right. Okay. So with that, let's move on to the next data type, year. Now हमने हमारे analysts के birth year save किए. Which table? It's in fact here, dim analyst, birth year, and we have saved. We have stored a year in a year, like year in year format. Now, why is that important? Because every time somebody is storing the birth year for a particular analyst or a new employee, they might end up typing something weird, like किसी ने कोई 1987 लिखेगा, कोई शायद सिर्फ 87 लिखेगा. So in order to avoid that, we are telling them कि भाई Y में ही हमेशा save करो. So data entry में problem नहीं होती है. Most of these what you see here is right data type जो use कर रहे हैं ना, it most of the time it ensures that कि वो data entry करने के टाइम पे ना कुछ गड़बड़ ना करे. So it has to, whenever somebody entering an application details or employee details or queue details or whatever, they have to comply with the data types we have mentioned. All right. Now there are a lot more data types in MySQL that is beyond the scope of this project. But in case if you're interested, always check out the MySQL documentation. Google पे जाके कर सकते हो कि data type MySQL, and it will take you to a MySQL documentation. Or these days we are using ChatGPT quite a lot, so why not use it instead of just uh, searching through the list of all the possible websites that Google will show you. We'll probably just ask the question, create a table of most commonly used MySQL data types with the following columns: definition, types, range of values, size used, and examples. And let me see what happens. Um, I hope it works. Enter. Let's see what ChatGPT returns. So we'll wait for it to process. All right, so it's coming up now. So you see, it's thinking about it. We have quite a lot of data types, and it gives you everything in a nice table, which is easier to read, easier to just copy paste, refer to later. So this is pretty good. What ChatGPT is doing here is pretty amazing. All right. So with that, let me end this video. In the next video, we'll start looking at the data that we will be adding into the tables that we will create using our entity relationship diagram. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.